Oh, hello.
Oh, I can't hear you. That's a good start, isn't it?
Oh no. I'm
There we
just
are.
blind. I can see you. I see you saying, Julia, we'll just go on blind faith. Oh,
Yeah, I mean, I think I was plugged into the wrong hole,
oh
which is
I
the
really have
all
done
too
that.
common experience in 2020.
How are you? The wonderful Mr. Knight. How are you?
Do you want the standard stock British answer, or do
No,
you want the
I
honest
want the
answer?
honest truth, please.
I'm really struggling at the moment, Kate. To be
I,
honest,
yeah, I hear.
uh, it's been a year,
Yeah,
uh, and yeah, not coping particularly well. I think the kind of I haven't had a break in over 8 months. It's been a really challenging kind of past few months as a parent and a single parent, as somebody
yeah.
that's been homeschooling, as somebody that's self-employed, as somebody that's part of a community with very much a focus on dealing with the emotional challenges of self-employment, but just dealing with this year as well. It's been quite hard work, to be honest.
Yeah, I really hear you. And do you know what? I really like to talk about this, and I like to talk about it in detail, if that's okay. But I suppose really what I should do is introduce you first of all, which what normally happens, isn't it? Obviously today is called "What's Your Story," and it's about sharing our journeys in mental health. And I have the pleasure of having Mr. Knight being part of my team, part of the push team, the brilliant Mr. Knight, who always gets nothing short of the most rave reviews when he works with our clients because of his incredible work. And I wanted him to be part of this session because I know that he's got an awesome story to tell and stuff to talk about. And indeed, even when we were prepping, we really went into it. But actually, in particular, how he's driven to also support the mental health of others in creating the Leapers Network. And Leapers, for anyone that doesn't know it, is basically a community for modern workers, right? People who work in a much more freelance capacity, supporting the mental health of the self-employed, offering really not only that kind of community and that peer-to-peer support, but also really tangible stuff, that we all need, in particular, obviously, when we're working on our own, because that in itself, not having that kind of backup of the corporation behind us, and dear God, people are going to be going into this stuff more than ever, I would imagine, over the coming months. Where do I get that support from? So how invaluable it is. Because we are all going through it at the moment, I think, and you've just touched on it, this year, when I start these conversations, normally it's around, when did you realize that you have mental health? But I'd love to talk a little bit about now, and then we can come back to that. I
Yeah.
think, and you're probably seeing this more a lot with the people that you're working with, the people within Leapers, how people are feeling right now. It's fucking real, right? It's real and it's big, and it's stuff we've never had to deal with before.
Yeah, it is very real, and it's remarkable how different people are dealing with it in very different ways.
And having
I'm sure
different experiences.
very different experiences, and that this phrase of "we're not all in the same storm, not all in the same boat, but we are in the same storm," which I think is a brilliant way of articulating that it affects different people in different ways.
Yeah.
And but I think in some regards, the self-employed, to a lesser or greater extent, have been were more prepared for this than a lot of people. We deal with uncertainty as standard.
Yeah.
We're not necessarily working in offices. There's far higher likelihood of working on your own and remotely. So we were more technically set up, and kind of just rapid change and things suddenly, being out of your control is something which we're quite used to. So in a lot of regards, I think self-employment was a bit of a canary in the coal mine
Yeah.
with COVID. We knew that things were coming earlier because projects started getting cancelled. We were collectively feeling that sudden, oh, what do we do now? And it was a very spiky kind of emotional reaction for many people. And we've been having to figure it out for ourselves. There are massive gaps in support from government around self-employment. If you're a limited company owner, for instance, as many self-employed are forced to be if they want to work, they've had no financial support. And we've been having to work it out for ourselves because, as you say, we don't have an HR team, right? There isn't somebody you can go, hey, what are my rights here? Or, can you just look at this contract? Or, and equally, you don't have a team at all. You don't have somebody you can just turn to the left and go, oh, this is hard, right? So yeah, it's incredibly difficult. But I think, as you say, the nature of work for many is changing. The future of work is kind of approaching us more rapidly, perhaps as of this year, and more people are stepping into self-employment. So I think it's not a minority way of working.
Yeah, and I suppose then I think what you've done. I wonder then if in particular, I suppose what you've been through in terms of your mental health, and let's talk more about that in a moment. In particular, now how you kind of look at how you manage that. I wonder then if that's actually something now which is becoming more real for more people, actually having to be much more acutely aware of what's going on a day-to-day basis and thinking about how you manage it. Are you seeing that within, I mean, it's been particularly with new people coming into the network?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think we have a healthy amount of cognitive bias in Leapers, because if people are coming to Leapers, then they are actively thinking about their mental health and already like, oh, actually, this is something I want to do. We all know the numbers around 1 in 4 people will struggle with mental health challenges at some point within 12 months. I think that number is 100% this year.
Yeah.
But I think the thing which I certainly always kind of talk about is it's for people who haven't necessarily struggled with poor mental health, who aren't actively thinking about it, who don't know what the things are to look out for, that are symptoms of, oh, maybe I should keep an eye on this. So I think over the last 5 years, mental health at work particularly has risen higher on the agenda, and I think more people are aware about it, more are proactively thinking, how do I set boundaries? How do I make sure that I've got time for myself? So it's definitely becoming more in people's consciousness. But we've just finished a research study, which we do every year, around the challenges of mental health, and over 65% of the respondents said they wouldn't know where to turn for support and access to that sort of information or support or content. So I think even if you're looking for it, there's a big gap in being able to find it.
And so one of our coaches, the wonderful Jeff McDonald, who I'm sure that you would have heard speak, used to be VP of HR for EMEA for Unilever until he had his own mental breakdown. And since then, his purpose has been about going out and destigmatizing mental health. And as he beautifully puts it, COVID has democratized mental health, right? We are all now aware of how external events have an impact on how we're thinking and feeling. I wonder, and I literally just thought about it as you were saying that stat about 1 in 4. I wonder now if that stat, was that stat actually made up of people? Was that stat down to a truth of whether or not people were feeling it, or if a truth of whether or not people even knew it? And I suppose where I'm getting to now is actually that so for example, one of our clients, Habas, since we've been working with them, their cases of sickness have stayed the same, but their instances of sickness due to poor mental health has increased. And where I'm trying to get through with this is that actually we're understanding more and we're more aware of this stuff going on than ever before. That's the difference, right?
Is it definition and reporting, or is it a change in the reality? I mean, I don't think it matters, to be honest. I think kind of there's one of the challenges around mental health, capital M or lowercase m, or however you want to, is definition. Like, what does it mean? And the spectrum of mental illness versus mental health and just well-being. And I think a lot of those definitions get in the way. And I've heard people say, oh, I'm too stressed to worry about my mental health. It's like, I think it doesn't really matter, right? It's about recognizing that your health, everybody has health. Everybody has physical health, has emotional health, has financial health, has, and things influence that. And being more aware of the things which influence it positively and negatively is a really good thing. We don't just go to the gym if you're grossly overweight, you do it to maintain your health. And there are things within work that you can do to make sure that you're well there as well. I think if it's too much focused on, oh, it's a mental health thing, or it's a financial health thing, or it's a work thing, we get into solving symptoms rather than saying, well, what are the causes of impact on your mental health? So giving people a banana and some yoga on a Friday is not going to stop them from being burnt out if their boss is asking them to work on weekends week on week.
Right. And I suppose that the point I'm trying to make with that awareness is simply that actually I understand that this external event is having an effect, rather than me maybe denying it to myself and to others. That's a step in the right direction. And
absolutely.
And would you agree with that statement then, that and maybe, I mean, as you said, obviously you've got cognitive bias when it comes to something like LEAPers, but maybe the conversations that you're having, that people are becoming more, I mean, certainly I would back this up, the conversations that we're having with organizations and individuals is that more people are becoming aware, and the conversations are becoming a lot better now. Yeah,
completely. And I think there was a piece of work from, I think, Deloitte a few years ago, which showed that there was a return on investment in mental health. And I think that was the turning point for businesses, when they recognized there was between a 5 or 8 times ROI on every pound that was invested in mental health. That businesses were losing over £70 billion a year on work-related stress. When they realized that mental health actually affected their bottom line, suddenly people started picking up and changing things.
The right thing to do, but actually, it does have that impact as well. Matthew, I'd like to know a little bit more about LEAPers, and what I mean by that, for what was your rationale for starting it, to have that strength, to start a community of that nature. Where did that come from for you?
No rationale, no decision-making process. It was an accidental community.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, completely. I had a 6-month notice period at a job which I was leaving, and I was writing around just how work was weird and old-fashioned and designed in a strange way, and writing a lot about it, and people were getting engaged in comments. But I was writing on LinkedIn, and there wasn't a space to have a conversation back with people. So I started a Slack channel where just a group of people started talking about the changing nature of work, flex, remote, part-time, return from parental leave. And a lot of it was around, people who were changing the way that they work. But what was really interesting was most of the conversations in there weren't about, oh, what accounting software do you use, or how do you get connected to Slack, to the Zoom, to the YouTube, to the MySpace, it was about the emotional experience. It was about, oh, I don't know how to talk to my boss about switching to Flex, or now I am working remotely, I don't feel as connected, and just it made me look at how, despite the size of the shift to more flexible, remote, freelance, kind of hybrid teams, there was no shortage of technology and process and, that kind of operational side of conversation. But there was nothing really looking at the emotional and human interaction side of things. And as the community grew, I just made a decision that, look, we could tackle all of changing nature of work, or we could focus on the bit where there seems to be a real gap. And about 12 months after that Slack community started, I made a decision to say, right, we are wholeheartedly looking at the challenge of mental health and self-employment. And it was very much reaction to what people were needing at the time. And as a result, that's now allowed us to take the community, the conversations and insights from the community, and get them out there so other people can see it. Yeah. So even if you've just got a couple of people chatting on a Slack, it's actually taking those insights and then getting them in front of people who go, oh, I've been feeling this as well. It's not just me. It's part of the experience.
And that's, that in itself, and that's exactly the rationale behind these sessions, right? Actually, if we can start talking about this stuff that's going on for each and every one of us every single damn day, actually then other people can relate to it. But I'm really pleased that you brought this up, right? And this whole thing around the what might have started as a community focused on, how do we the new world of work, and it could have looked at technology and processes. People naturally reverted to, not reverted, but went to a space of actually wanting to talk about how they were feeling and the emotional side of it and the human side of it. And it's really interesting because, we talk to a lot of our clients at the moment about how do we recreate that community? How do we recreate that culture if we're not together?
Mm-hmm.
And naturally we all want to go there anyway, right? We all, because we all hanker after connection. Actually, we want to go there, but it's allowing space for that, right? It's allowing space to create those moments. And actually, from experience, it sounds like it happens naturally, right? And actually, as employers, they just need to allow more opportunity to do that.
I think, there are definitely some fundamental human truths about people needing connection, meaningful connections. And that doesn't, the all too common narrative about remote work or freelancing is it's isolating. So go and sit in a coffee shop, go sit in a working space. Like you can sit in a room of 1,000 people and still be lonely and isolated because it's not a meaningful connection. But the reality is that, people need different things. They interact in different ways. They have different communication styles. They work in different ways, and even the same person will have different working preferences within the tasks which they do and the way they need to work. I know that I have collaborative modes and focus modes and introspective modes, and they're different. And work for too long has been like a one model approach. It's like we all sit in an open plan office, or we all sit in cubicles, or we all take Friday off because we're moving to flexible now. And I think what self-employment allows for a lot of people is I need to design how I work. I understand where I'm more focused or where I'm more motivated, or things that I need to work well, whether that be like feedback styles or brief, how you write a brief, or just how you work with other people. Plenty of introverts who are self-employed because they don't actually want that constant, banter at the office and the kind of that type of connection. And I think that's what modern work is increasingly moving towards, is a more considered design of how people work. A more appreciation of an individual's needs, but also the collective needs, and how they're not always the same, and how they are a little bit more fluid. And mental health is, if you express it as like energy or attention or focus or motivation in other forms, like that is ultimately what you're trying to measure is are the things which we're doing in our design, are they keeping those at the right level, not too high, not too low, just kind of like at the right ebb and flow, in order to both deliver on what we need to achieve at work, but also not kill our people. And I think that's why the businesses who start with a little bit more of a people-centric, team-centric, kind of output-centric, as opposed to, timesheets and day rates and all this kind of stuff. Why things like B Corp is really interesting, and why small businesses that design around small teams that build psychological safety, all of these principles, which actually are really old-fashioned, are doing really well, because they're letting people be part of that team rather than fitting into some sort of model.
And I suppose that's the thing, isn't it? And certainly when I used to do my talks a year ago, one of the things that came out was actually, this world where we're trying to do too much versus a company that's got incredibly traditional ways of working. The human in the middle was taking the hit, right? I simply can't do all of these things whilst fitting within this really archaic and out of date model in many ways. And I suppose that now, I hope that the one thing that is coming out of, whether we term it remote working, distributed working, wherever we land with this, is that there is the opportunity for tailoring in order to get to our best. And what I hope doesn't happen is that there is still a reliance on the organization to deliver what that new model looks like. there has to be the opportunity for individuals to step into this and say, this is what I want, this is how I want this to work, and this is what I want life to look like. If they're and as someone who's been through, and then consequently the impact that, because everything then comes back to how I'm going to feel, right? If I can make work within my life, then it's a bloody good basis and a bloody good foundation for life getting that bit better.
Yeah, and just building on that,
working in the way that you,
sorry, say that again, Kate.
I said working in the way that you do, that's been a massive thing, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really interesting point around where that change in design comes from. I was reading an article just this week about open door policies and mental health support for managers and employees. And the point it was making is that an open door policy is not enough. I can't remember who the phrase is, but if we asked the people what they wanted, they would ask for a faster horse. Ironically, if we did have horses now in the streets as opposed to loads of motor cars, it might be a very different situation that we have in the world. But that aside, it isn't just a case of going, hey guys, what do you want to do? Design it. There needs to be some pastoral, force and structure and drive from the business. It's like it is your role as a manager to take care of people and do what is right for the team and the individual and the organization. It's a blended need rather than just kind of, hey, you design it for yourself, guys, you'll be fine. So it's a really delicate balance between like push and pull. And I think that is the point that we're reaching. Is it's the dynamics of power are shifting. The last 100 years was command and control factory kind of model. It's like, we will tell you what you do, how you do it. You're a cog in the machine. I worry that the last few years and kind of like, future of work stuff shifted too far. The other direction is like people centric. It needs to be like what the person wants and work around the individual. And that isn't right either. If it turns into a conversation between individual and manager, between peers, between like objectives and individual needs, and it's fluid and it changes over time and is responsive and it learns, that's when we start to get into a better place. But it's really hard because nobody likes change. Nobody really enjoys constant shifting, and it's scary for people and it takes a lot of effort.
Well, and it's really fucking clunky, for a better way of putting it. You're suddenly putting new processes and ways of working with people that maybe don't have the skills, behaviors, or beliefs to be able to deliver on it. And you actually end up in a space where you've got two very different entities going on. And I think actually, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I think one of the greatest challenges with remote working is that people don't know how to remote work. And what I mean by that is not the processes and the technology, but actually, do I know how to manage or empower people from afar, right? When I'm not stood in front of them, can I trust someone? Do I know how to have a conversation, a challenging conversation? Do I know how to boundary my time? Do I know how to give feedback? This is stuff that is, if we are going, do I know how to share learnings if I'm not sat next to that person? We have got to see that we are going into a wholesale cultural shift when it comes to the way of working, and have new skills to do that. And I don't know if many people are there yet.
I think of all the things which you listed, of all the questions of how to there, only one of them was actually is any different in a remote context. Like, do I know how to give good feedback? Do I know how to learn and listen? Do I know how to trust? Can I trust? How do I measure people's work if I'm not looking over their shoulder? None of those are remote working issues. Those are really good management and leadership issues.
Yeah, and they're not happening anyway, wherever we may be.
Yeah, exactly. And I think remote is forces us to recognize that actually we need to have trust in our employees wherever they are sat. If you don't trust your employee, then you shouldn't have hired them, or you shouldn't be managing them. And you've hit the nail on the head. Realistically, most managers are promoted to have teams as opposed to it necessarily being trained to be a good manager or want to be a manager. most organizations still, you get promoted and people are attached to that, as opposed to, I want to be a people person, I want to be a specialist. So there's so much to fix when it comes to organizational design and how businesses work. And I think that's what holds us up, because the minute you start asking questions like that and scratching at the surface, like, oh God, it's so huge, where do I even start? And things stall and then fall back to, oh God, let's just do yoga and free bananas.
Absolutely.
As opposed to small tests, trying things, getting people the opportunity to try something different. And when it doesn't work, not if it doesn't work, when it doesn't work, rather than saying, oh, it didn't work, saying, right, well, that particular configuration wasn't as good as it could have been. Is there another way of doing it? And I think we're seeing that in a lot of organizations that go through any kind of shift. It's like, oh, flexible didn't work for us because their configuration of that wasn't right, or remote didn't work for us because their configuration, as opposed to that particular way of doing it didn't work. Is there something we can learn from?
Yeah, and that's really interesting, isn't it? And I wonder if this will create more test and learn within companies. We've suddenly, this whole thing was actually, I mean, I don't know about you, but certainly we found in the first 6 months of lockdown, fuck me, the speed at which we changed as an organization, a small one at that, albeit, but the speed and the adrenaline that we had. And actually, if things went wrong, then it was okay. We just moved on from it. And I wonder if there has been a bit of a cultural shift within organizations that has happened. I don't know if you've seen any of that with some of the ones that you've worked with.
Yeah, I think, test and learn culture is something that's been around, and certainly as language has been around for a long time. I think most organizations are quite good at testing, not very good at learning. And that's the struggle that most organizations have, is it's really easy to innovate. It's really easy to try new things, but it's really hard to do that again slightly differently and improve it. And scale that with better impact, because generally there's nobody who's responsible for doing it, and it falls between reporting lines or departments, or you're suddenly working horizontally across a business instead of vertically. And organizations, literally the definition of organization is to keep those structures in place rather than to embrace new ways of working. So I think the best leaders and managers are the ones that recognize that evolution doesn't work without some sort of mutation, and mutations are good things because we learn, didn't realize that was going to work in that way, let's roll with it and see what happens. But investing in continual change, not seeing change as a project which has a beginning and end, but just that is the way that businesses now need to be.
And we're talking a lot about that at the moment, and I'm really pleased that you brought up that thing around beginning and end. The one thing that I believe that we're going to keep seeing currently is obviously the change that's going to keep coming. And actually it's about making sure that people can keep going with that, rather than this is a plan of us getting back into the office.
Yeah.
And, I suppose to that end then, are you, in terms, you're very used to, and you are, and obviously a lot of people within your community are very used to going into organizations and very quickly having to become part of the culture or part of the community within that organization. And then possibly coming out of it as well, and certainly a lot of the companies that we're talking to are experiencing that now on a grand scale, actually. And I'm sure I'm okay to talk about this. With TikTok, is one of our clients. Last week when we had our event, Trevor, who is the head of marketing down there, global marketing down there, was saying exactly that. Most of the people within the office haven't actually met each other. What, do you have any advice around that for when we are setting up the cultures within organizations, quickly helping people form those relationships? Or feeling psychologically safe. Maybe that's a better way of putting it.
Oh, well, okay. So there's two very different things there. I think, getting to understand ways of working and culture and working preferences, I think those are relatively easy to communicate. if they're articulated well somewhere. And I think, you know, there's a lot to unpack here, right? First of all, companies have an articulated culture, which is a poster in their toilets, which is so often not the reality of what the working culture is. And I think there's a disconnect between that. And if you give that to somebody on their first day at work and they read the culture, it's like, oh, collaborative and psychologically safe. And the reality is, so I think, you know, communicating the reality of ways of working and habits and things that's really easy to do. You just put it on a piece of paper and be honest. Being honest is not hard. It's not difficult. It's not the easiest thing to do. But communicating it is really that simple. It's like there's a sheet of paper to say, we are in this team, we are more of a kind of pitch your ideas using data and justification and numbers rather than big ideas and slides. Like, that's easy to communicate. It takes the time to sit down and capture all those things and put them into a bit of a document. The second point we should talk about, like psychological safety, I think that's incredibly hard, because capturing and articulating ways of working in a culture is just observation and honesty, whereas changing that culture and enabling psychological safety and people being able to say something without fear of retribution or receive feedback without it seeming like an attack, that's incredibly hard, because that's people change, and that's supporting those things. So I think that they're two different things. But to answer the first question about how you do it, you know, employees have onboarding, and, you know, variably, right? But I think what good onboarding processes do is they step you through why the organization exists, how your team works, the kind of personalities and the characters and the ways of working. And generally, freelancers, we don't get onboarded. We get a brief, we get a desk, maybe. We get access to a million and one different intranet systems and Slacks and Teams channels and all these kind of stuff. And we navigate and we have to fill in the gaps and work out what we're trying to do. And generally, depending on the length of your contract, you're not really integrated. You're there, and it's very clear that you are there to do a job and then leave. It varies depending on the kind of organization, but it is quite a divide a lot of the time. So I think a lot of freelancers are quite adept at recognizing, I'm going to be here for a while, I'm not making friends, I'm here to do a job, do my job well, and then move on. And that's, you know, people are more or less okay with that depending on how they want to work. What is missing though, and we have a tool in Leapers called Manual of Me, which is a way of individuals being able to express what their working preferences and styles are. And I think this is something that is missing in a lot of organizations. There's always the kind of, hey, here's the organizational culture and here's our team structure and org charts. But it doesn't get down to, Mark is, he thinks in this way. Mark will only react to a chart with data on it. So don't take him a big idea, which is really exciting, because he's not interested. He just wants to know, will it deliver the results? Whereas Mary, she needs to understand the context of where this sits. Oh, and by the way, Mary only works on Mondays to Wednesdays, and she works 3 hours earlier because she's in a different time zone, but she does come in every third Thursday. Don't send her an email out of hours, because it really stresses her out when she gets emails. She will respond to it, and it seems like she's being responsive, but actually it really freaks her out. And she's a single parent of 2 kids, and that is generally getting emails at bed and bath time really worries her, but it stresses her out, and she comes in the following day and it worries her. But you won't know that because Mary doesn't say that, or she's responsive and it seems like that. And you know, generally you have 3, 6, 9 months to figure this out with the people on your team if you're an employee. But when you're building rapid teams, and this is not a freelancing, this is just modern teams are increasingly shorter, project based, kind of bursty, kind of mission based
structures. You know, we get crux of that or really quickly when we're not actually together.
So I think that kind of emotional relationship, kind of getting to know people really, really quickly, is something that is missing from a lot of teams. And that isn't just ways of working. It's like, you know, how to work with me to get the best out of me. It's stuff that is going on. It's not just work. It's the whole piece. And I think we would all benefit from being a little bit more open and communicative. And also, you know, designing what those questions that we ask each other are collectively as a team as well. Like, I might want to know, a specific thing about everybody in my team because I need to know that to work well. Whereas somebody else might not want to share a part of their life, whereas another person might want to. And even just having the conversation of designing processes like that, rather than getting it from HR, here is our onboarding process, everybody must do this. It's like, well, how do we design how we want to get to know each other so we can work well because we have a certain way of... there's really simple tools, but it takes the time to do it. And that's what most teams don't have, is the time to invest in the relationship building. And
that's the thing, isn't it? I think that's something, and I was talking to Helen Tupper about this at the beginning of the day. I think, to round this up, I suppose my point is if we want to get better at creating those safer spaces, or if we want to get better at creating safer spaces, which are a consequence of having better relationships, then we have to be more open with each other, right? And we have to be able to be prepared to share more, as well as share more of ourselves, and also take more of others as well. Matthew, is like one final point. I would love to hear from you. Like, what are then those, in your opinion, kind of like the kind of questions then that we could or should be asking of each other? Is it, how, and you mentioned one of them, how to get the best of me, how to, this is the way I work in this situation. Are there any really good questions that we could be asking each other to be finding out a little bit more about each other, or getting, I suppose, helping form those relationships?
How are you? I think that's the best place to start, and listening genuinely to the answer, and our responsibility to answer that question more honestly and openly. I think we have a need ourselves individually to know certain things, and the other person might have a disconnected or different need to share certain things. So I challenge to a certain extent that we need to bring more of ourselves to work, because for plenty of people, they're quite happy with their friends and their social life and professional life being completely separate, and they don't need to bring any more to themselves because they're certainly not getting any more salary for it. So bring your whole self to work. It's like, no, you get a bit of me, and I'm fine with that. So I think it's very personal and very individual. But if we start with actually asking more questions and listening to the answer, rather than kind of just saying and publishing and presenting and structuring, then that's a good starting place. And that takes time, and it means listening honestly and openly and non-judgmentally. It's very hard for a lot of people to do. There's always, quite often you should do this then, or like a response or an answer back, as opposed to just letting people just share a little bit.
And it's a skill within itself, isn't it?
Yeah.
On that note, I mean, I have loved listening to you. I think that as I started off by saying, I feel very blessed that you're part of my team, and that you come and work with Push. And I think that the wisdom that you have and the experiences that you have and that you share with others in terms of genuinely making places that you work in better, and sharing that knowledge with others, this for me genuinely, I think we talk so much about Push, about making places more human, and I know that's what drives you as well, in terms of just talk to each other more, ask more questions, listen more. The presence that you give to people is the greatest gift that we can give. And if we do want to create environments that do that, that's about us all becoming a little bit more human within that. So thank you so much for sharing that. I think that was a really, really useful session.
Thanks, Kate, and I appreciate you. I always appreciate talking to you, because it always provokes me to think about things in a different way. And thanks for the opportunity to talk.
You are a wonder, and I will speak to you very soon. Have a wicked day.
And you take care.